Michele, you're president of the United States today. Don't talk to me about policy. Talk to me. Tell the American people what you would say to them about preparing their own house. You're president. What would you say to the American people today?
I would be very straight with the American people and tell them that economic collapse could potentially ensue very quickly in the EU. Because of that, the United States could see a rolling effect of recession, which means our dollar could continue to lose value. There could potentially be a run on the banks. That's normally what happens. I would urge people to not give in to that form of panic. At the same time, I would urge them to think very carefully about their own family and think about their economic resources, their food resources, water resources, the very basics of what we need for survival. When we were worried and sensible of the danger of the Cold War, we took precautions. In Switzerland, every household is required to have a bomb shelter, food, water, to have a firearm. I think in the United States, it's important for us to just take simple precautions in the case of an economic disruption or in the case of a military disruption. I think that it's just important to take those precautions. I'm not saying that there will be a military disruption. I'm saying that I think it only makes sense to pull back and examine your personal finances, but think about what you would need in 7 days, for a 14-day period, for a 30-day period, and just make accommodations. If you need, for instance, special medical devices, think about that, or prescriptions.
Okay. Michele, let me switch gears to, because I'm very concerned about our military. I think our military has been overplayed, in many cases intentionally. I don't even know what we're doing in some of the countries that we're at. I mean, this Pakistan thing was an absolute nightmare this weekend, and now we have students, see if this sounds familiar, see if it sounds like 1979, revolutionaries breaking into the embassy in Iran today and ransacking the place.
The British embassy.
Yeah, the British embassy. What is that? Yeah. What is that all about? What is that going to mean?
Well, it looks clearly like this was something orchestrated by the authorities in Iran, and they're trying to send a signal. They're upset because sanctions are beginning to be imposed on Iran, which, of course, they should be. And what it would say to me is, why in the world would the Brits even have an embassy in Iran anyway? We call Iran a state sponsor of terror. I would suggest that they not have an embassy open with Iran. Remember, it was President Obama who said he was going to speak with the Iranians with no preconditions. They have very well-stated designs against our ally Israel and against the United States. So we need to look at them and treat them for what they are, a state sponsor of terror.
Is that an act of war on the United Kingdom?
I wouldn't say it's an act of war, but I would say clearly it's an act of aggression. I think it's up to the Brits to make their decision about how they would respond, but I don't think that I would keep my embassy open to give them a target for attack. I think, again, we need to do whatever we can to have...
Wouldn't that empower them? If you retreat, wouldn't that empower when they feel that they've won? They've chased the British out of Iran.
Well, I don't know that I would call that retreat. You have a new book out about George Washington, and I think that one thing George Washington was sensible of is there are times when he needed to just have survival and protect the troops. He would fall back. He wasn't waving the white flag, but he'd fall back so that he could regroup and then have a better battle. It seems to me that it'd be better for the Brits, and again, this is up to them, but I think maintaining an embassy in Iran is an inviting target, and I think I would try to use other methods, which would be real sanctions with real teeth, to try and get the attention of the Iranians to cause them to buckle.
Okay, Syria is flying off the cliff. The UN has reported 250 children were tortured and killed, and Russia is sending warships to Syria to defend Syria. Russia has made their ally. They've made the ally of Iran, and they've made the ally now of Syria. Have you looked into Pooty Poot's eyes? Is he a friend of the United States?
Well, George Bush said he did, and
Oh,
he
yeah, I
saw
know.
a friend. And John McCain looked into his eyes and saw the KGB. I think John McCain was a little more accurate than George Bush on that. But you're looking at a new axis of evil between North Korea, the Chinese, Russia, Syria. Isn't it interesting? It includes state sponsors of terror. We're looking at potentially 3 Russian warships coming in, making their way into Syrian ports. This is not good. We're seeing an axis of evil extend potentially if Iraq falls and it looks like Iran may come in and have dominance in Iraq, there would be influence from Iran extending from the Persian Gulf all the way to the Mediterranean. This is a very dominant hegemon in that region, and one that we certainly should have contained, and I wish it wasn't growing.
People say to me all the time, well, what would people's motivation be with Russia? Do you believe it's reasonable to think their motivation to get into bed with such evil dictatorships and is because they see the sense, the shift of power and the possibility of saying lights out to the West, and if they can destabilize that region, especially if they can destabilize energy-wise, oil-wise, they stabilize that region for the United States and Europe. They're the main supplier. They win, don't they?
That's right. Well, you're right, and they've already played that game. They've put that card down with Ukraine, with Georgia. They've already played that, and they see what the rest of the world sees. That's weakness on the part of the EU, weakness on the part of the United States. They want to be where there's strength. They see aggression in China and aggression in Iran, and they're throwing in common cause with them and with the satellite, their acolyte Syria, and also that potentially could include Sudan and other nations as well, state sponsors of terror. So they have no problem with a Russian nuclear scientist helping Iran gain a nuclear weapon. So these are a new evil axis of power that we're seeing emerging in the Middle East. This doesn't bode well for the United States, especially when President Obama signed a treaty last December with Russia, which would actually denuclearize the United States, or at least serve to bring about a beginning of a denuclearization. We're seeing third world basket case nations nuclearize up while the United States is denuclearizing.
Can I ask you something out of left field? Would you shut down the Fed? Would you do what would your treatment be of the Fed?
Well, what Congress needs to do is retool the Enabling Act. You need to go back to the initial legislation, and it is frightening to look at the level of power that Congress gave to the Federal Reserve. When you look at the monster that the Federal Reserve has become, there is no way that we can allow them to continue with that level of power. It has to be revisited. And whether they're completely abolished or whether they are brought down to the size of a peanut compared to what they are now, I think that has to be redone, because they aren't transparent, and what they're doing is frightening, and we're holding the bag.
So let's be very clear. You would at least bring them down to the size of a peanut?
I would take them down from the mighty perch that they're on now, and I may consider altogether abolishing the Fed.
Okay. Michele, when we come back, I want to move off of the typical questions here and move into character and conviction. We'll do that next.